Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming back at you for another Film Fanatic show. It is 10:31. Hope everyone's doing good. Feels great to be back to doing these videos at a pretty regular pace. Um, back, I think it's the second or third week of school already. School has been back in session already. I'm back working pretty much my normal hours at Montessori. It's yeah, the summer goes by so damn fast. It's pretty fast and furious. The weather has still been awesome. I always get a little bit down when the summer ends because I love the summer so much. Because compared to there's that time frame between November and February or so where winter is a long time, and it's nice to have some snow, but the cold weather lasts forever. But yeah, the summer goes by so darn fast. But anyway, so I've been again back to pretty much making a video every day, and it's been a great it's been great to be back at it again. So appreciate. I've gotten a lot of new subscribers in the last few weeks. I was away from my computer for a few weeks. I had the last 2 weeks have been pretty busy, and I was away from home for a while. I was away for like 2 weeks, just about, and then I was home for like a day or two, and I hadn't been able to make any videos. I don't usually, if I go out of town, I don't usually record any videos. I usually just do them here at Film Fanatic headquarters in the comfort of my own home because it's just a little easier and just the convenience and it's more fun. So I usually, will take a break. And, before I left, I went and recorded some videos and kind of uploaded them, set them up as premieres. So, yeah, and I did a little mini tour about 2 weeks ago with really awesome band Osmia. That's been a super fun journey this year. We did a mini tour last about 2 weeks, the weekend before last, and then I had to go to a funeral and remembrance pretty much a few days after I got back, and so I was home for a couple of days, and then had to go back out, and came back on Sunday, or actually I should say Monday night, and then kind of been back to reality since then. So, and before, it was pretty much before I left or so, or in between, I had a couple of days, but I did a video or two where I finished up some of the new movies that I got. I got some really fantastic movies at Bull Moose. And so I did a series of shows. I covered all those videos. And again, usually when I go to Bull Moose, I always seek out the most low budget exploitation movie I can possibly find. I love to take deep dives and be always surprised. I've gotten really familiar and comfortable with taking some chances as far as buying movies. A ton of movies that I've never seen before. I've gotten really familiar with a lot of the boutique labels that are out there, and I own a lot of those films, and it's been really great. So I finished up the series of all of those movies, and occasionally I still go and buy movies at the Goodwill in Rockland, Maine, which is pretty close by. Rockland's about 35 minutes here from my house. So I typically go there and buy movies where they I typically buy more, I guess, normal movies, if you want to call it that, on Blu-ray. They usually have a really great selection of movies from there. that I've gotten. I've kind of most of the movies. One of the biggest things that I've gotten through going to the Goodwill in Rockland is I've kind of completed my Marvel movie collection. All of the Marvel movies that I really love. There's a lot I don't have a whole lot of love for, but this the first wave of Marvel was pretty fantastic. So I've gotten most of those titles on Blu-ray. So that's been really fun. But I still go there and I still buy movies, and they typically have again big budget Hollywood movies. So one of the movies that I bought, which I had not, I realized I hadn't seen it. Probably, I remember seeing it in a theater, and it came out in 2002, which I was like, holy shit, I can't believe how old this movie is. And that is Martin Scorsese's Gangs of New York. Daniel Day Lewis, Cameron Diaz, and Leonardo DiCaprio. And I saw this movie only once, which is kind of crazy. I remember seeing this in the theater, and I like this movie. I'm a huge Scorsese fan. I mean, he's one of my favorite directors, and I've covered quite a few of his movies. You know, I've always talked about directors that have a legacy of movies or a career movies that they have done where there's like a consistency to them, and I usually directors that really kind of reach that level I really hold in high regard. And I've always said Martin Scorsese has always been one of my favorite directors, and it's still very true to this day. My favorite Scorsese film of all time is Mean Streets, but I love his work, and he is a very consistent director, and where his career spans decades, which is just wild. And his last film that he directed, Killers of the Flower Moon, is a pretty fantastic movie. I did see that in the theater last year. So again, when I picked this up, I was like, wow, I have not seen this movie since it came out in 2002, which is insane. So I remember seeing Gangs of New York in the theater, and I'm a huge Daniel Day Lewis fan. I mean, how can you not be? And There Will Be Blood is probably my favorite Daniel Day Lewis film, and I also love. There's so many great films. The Age of Innocence is another great film. I mean, he's such a great actor. He's a legend, and I've always been a huge Leonardo DiCaprio fan. I think he is a true chameleon as an actor. But so I was like really curious to see what this movie would be like to watch on Blu-ray, and to see if this movie is still really great, based on just seeing it one time. And it was really cheap. I think it was like $4 on Blu-ray. Never seen it on Blu-ray. I've never seen it on DVD. Just saw it in the theater, like I said, when it came out. And I remember liking this movie quite a bit when it came out. And it's been years and years and years since I've seen it, obviously. So I watched this again last night, and I have a lot of mixed things about this movie now. I really do, in all honesty. You know, it's it's regarded as when you think of the career of Scorsese. I mean, so many great movies. The Raging Bull, Goodfellas. I mean, the list is endless of just fantastic movies he's directed. Mean Streets being my favorite. Casino. The Cape Fear remake. I mean, just an incredible body of work that he's done. Taxi Driver, and I own a lot of Scorsese films on Blu-ray. And again, he's one of my favorite directors. And I remember, like this movie, Gangs of New York, is a movie that isn't really talked about all that much. I remember it was a big budget blockbuster. DiCaprio did this film a few years after Titanic, so when he was a mega star at that point. So when he did Gangs of New York, it was, he really came into being, one of the biggest names in Hollywood. And Daniel Day Lewis, of course, has always been. But as far as just sheer star power, but he's got all of the acting chops as well. He became a huge name, and remains a massive star, and I think rightfully so because he's an incredible actor. So, and one of the things like this movie has always been, I think people really like this movie. I remember it was very successful when it came out. I believe, and it was regarded as a good movie for the most part. But there were a lot of criticisms with this movie, and I remember over the years talking. It came up a few times where we were talking about Scorsese. Like in passing, like conversations with people, and I remember I can't remember when it was, but I was talking to somebody about this movie, and they said that this film was great in a lot of ways. It's a very dark. It's about the history of the first generation of the Italian immigrants and the Irish immigrants that came to New York, that all lived in the Five Points in New York City. And it's this movie is based on true events and some horrors that did take place during this time with gang warfare. But I remember some people saying that they didn't really like this movie because they felt like it was kind of this like a comic book movie in a weird way. And I watched this last night, and the first thing I will say is, well, as far as like the positives, there's some scenes in this film especially between Daniel Day Lewis. I mean, Daniel Day Lewis is kind of incredible in this film, and DiCaprio is really great. There's some really incredible scenes between their two, both of their characters in this film. Again, there's some stunning performances, but with especially with Daniel Day Lewis and DiCaprio, and there's some really great chemistry with some of the characters. But and again, the thing is, and the story itself, right? Historically, it's based on true events, the gang warfare that had occurred in New York. A lot of people were killed during this time period in New York, and there were these gangs that were, battling for power. But and so it is based on real some real historical events and true events that happened and that took place. But there's something about this movie that is so the way the film is shot and the scope of this film. Again, the production value is pretty incredible. This feels like this movie was made for like $100 million. I don't know what the budget was, but or more. I mean, it's just the scale of this film is kind of it's totally dazzling and it's beautiful to look at. But it's so the thing that I did not like about this movie is that it took this pretty realistic, or I should say this these accounts historically that really happened, but it's told in a way that it's so over the top, um, that it does feel like a comic book movie. It's really strange. Like it's so heightened, and it's so kind of ridiculously over the top that there's nothing. It like takes this grounded story, but it doesn't tell it in a grounded way whatsoever, and it really it was really disappointing, and this film really did not hold up very well at all. And it does feel like a comic book movie, where you take this, a story that's based on some historical accounts, and for the most part, I think a true story. But it's told in this way where it feels like it's kind of ridiculous. Yeah, it's I and again, like I had said before, that that was one criticism that I had heard from people, like over the years, or when this movie would come up, that some folks didn't like this movie because it felt like a comic book movie in this weird way, and it really does. It's really strange. Like Daniel Day Lewis's character, he's like this, super villain, and it's just I don't know. It's just and there's some really bad like cliche things and themes throughout this film. Yeah, the other thing that I did not really like about this movie is it is super fucking long. Like it really, I don't know the exact time of this film, but it felt like I was watching this movie for like 4 hours. Like it's really long. It's really ambitious, and again, it's such a grand scale film, but it drags ass after a while, and it felt like it has these really bad cliches throughout the film where it's like really predictable and kind of ridiculous, and it reaches this point of where you're like, okay, it's very predictable. You kind of know where it's going to go, and you're like, okay, this is probably where things should be kind of being, should start wrapping up. But then it just goes on and on for another 2 hours, or at least it seems like it does. And it's really monumental just to get through this movie. And yeah, I don't know. It's like I had again, I had only seen Gangs in New York one time, and it was shit almost 30 years ago at this point, 2002. So it's but I have to say this movie does not age well. It looks great. I don't really like the music that they use that Scorsese picked for this film. Like the whole opening sequence, it feels like you're watching an Avengers film, like, but not a good Avengers movie. It's really weird. It's really strange. It's off-putting, and it's funny because this came out, when comic book movies more or less were starting to kind of take off, but it feels like a comic book movie. It really does. Or like a graphic novel. And I'm not sure why Scorsese decided, when you think of Taxi Driver or Mean Streets or Goodfellas, where those movies are about, these, epics. They're epics. They're these epic stories, but they're grounded and they're gritty and they're very realistic or pragmatic. The way they're shot, the scope of it, there's a gritty realism to them, and the story itself is so strong. But I'm not sure why stylistically Scorsese decided to take this story that could have been shot that way, or a story told that way, like say Raging Bull, but decided to make it into this completely over the top, larger than life film experience. And it really, it's so over the top that it took me out of the movie. You know, uh, it was, it felt like I was watching an Avengers movie. Really strange, and it's strangely ironic. I mean, this came out in 2002, but a few years back, Scorsese got Martin Scorsese got in a little bit of hot water when well, not really, but he kind of got into some controversy when he made a statement a few years back. I think it was like 5 years ago or so, when he was saying, it was in the midst of, like, I mean, it's still happening, but there was, we tons and tons of new Marvel movies coming out, and he was basically saying that those movies were, just really big dumb movies. They weren't made with any intelligence. They had no value, and they were just pure popcorn films, and they had no substance. And he got, he got a little bit of backlash for that because of how critical he was, and I have to say, you know, Scorsese is a master director, and he earns the right to say whatever the fuck he wants to say, of course. And I think I on one hand I didn't really agree with him, but on one hand I did agree with him, especially where Marvel movies are now. But and it's ironic, that happened, and again that happened, way after Gangs of New York came out. So it's just funny that watching this movie, I'm like, wait, that's weird. This because I feel like Gangs of New York is this like overstuffed comic book movie, but not a very good comic book movie. Really disappointing watching this movie, and I have to say I almost didn't get all the way through it because it's such. I mean, Scorsese films are on the longer side, of course, but this film is so long and so kind of overstuffed that I there were moments of where I almost couldn't get through it. It's yeah, it felt. I don't know the actual length time that this film runs, but it felt like it was 4 hours. It's an undertaking, and and again, I was so disappointed with the over the top nature of this movie. It's so everything is so overblown, you know, and it's filled with all of these cliches, and the story is so predictable, especially with where it's going to go, and it's just kind of ridiculous. Like the opening sequence is like again it just it could have been. I felt like it could have been, it's a story based on historical events, but it could have been shot in a more grounded, grittier way. But instead, it feels like an Avengers movie. That's the only way I can put it. And it's so over the top with like production value and all the bells and whistles going off all at the same time, especially the beginning sequence. Like it really sets the mood, and you kind of get a sense of like what how the story is going to be told by that opening sequence. Which is again, this movie is very violent and very it's a very dark film, obviously, and it is pretty violent. It's more violent than I remember it being, but the characterizations, the arc of the characters, the action sequences are just like, come on, come on. And then the final sequence, the conclusion to this film is so it feels like it got shot up with steroids. This whole the film itself, and yeah, I had yeah I and ultimately I didn't really like this movie at all. I just thought it was kind of ridiculous and disappointing, and it didn't hold up very well. And it's been 20 years since I've seen this movie, so yeah, I would. And again, the other factor is the length of this movie. It's so goddamn long. I couldn't get all. I did get through it, but I kind of had to take a little bit of a break, and I don't know if I could watch this again. Yeah, very disappointing. And it was nominated for a bunch of awards when it came out, and I don't believe it won any, but it was nominated for like 10 Academy Awards. I don't know. It was really disappointing and kind of a letdown, and it doesn't age well. It's pretty dated too, even though it's 2002, which isn't that long ago. But there's this dated quality to it, and not in a good way. And it's so overstuffed. Yeah, it was weird. It was weird watching this again because it's been so long. But I would take a hard pass on watching this again. I almost didn't make it through this time. So yeah. Anyway, so thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.